I'm in LA. Excited to meet y'all.
The Dallas Mavericks just made one of the most shocking moves in NBA history. They traded away their franchise player Luka Dončić, a top 5 player in the league, a generational offensive talent, and the best thing to happen to the franchise since Dirk Nowitzki. If you're a Mavs fan, you're probably in shock, disbelief, or straight up denial. If you're a Laker fan, you're confused, asking, how did we just steal one of the best players in basketball? And if you're an NBA fan in general, you're wondering, what were the Mavs thinking? This isn't just a bad trade that will go down as one of the worst in history. It's a franchise-altering disaster. A move that fans, analysts, and future GM candidates will look back on as the moment Dallas lost its future and maybe even its franchise. This was a team that had one job: keep Luka happy, build around him, and capitalize on his prime, whether he's a poor defender or not. Instead, they just traded away the one player that gave them a real shot at a championship, who months ago took them to the finals with little help. But let's take it a step back, because this trade isn't just about the Mavericks failing Luka. It's about the NBA stepping in once again to prop up their favorite team and their most bankable star, LeBron James. The Los Angeles Lakers were headed for another disastrous season to their standards, hovering around mediocrity with no real title hopes. LeBron James, despite still producing at an elite level, needed help. And as we've seen before, the NBA always finds a way to step in and give it to him. Whether it was the Anthony Davis trade, suspiciously favorable buyouts, or constant mid-season adjustments that always seem to benefit his teams, the league has long been accused of stacking the deck in his favor. Now they've done it again. This time, they didn't just hand LeBron James another star. They gave him one of the best young players in NBA history in his prime. The league gets a massive ratings boost, the Lakers get a new superstar, and LeBron gets another shot at a ring. Meanwhile, the Mavericks are left in shambles, directionless, and without the one player who gave them a real future, who's still just 25 by the time he plays his first game for his new team. So how did things get to this point? How did a franchise with one of the best young players in the world end up making one of the worst trades of all time? Whatever the answer, I think it's safe to say that Luka Dončić is closer to winning an NBA championship now than Dallas appears to be, and for these reasons, this move was a huge franchise and generational failure. What happened? Let's talk about it. It's your boy JC Stunted Growth. Let's get it, man. Take a minute to like, subscribe, and comment on who I should do next. When the Mavericks landed Luka Dončić in 2018, they didn't just get a great player, they got a generational talent. From day one, Luka proved he was special, winning Rookie of the Year and quickly becoming one of the league's most dominant offensive forces. But instead of building a true contender around him, the Mavericks wasted years with questionable roster moves. They gambled on Kristaps Porzingis, but injuries and poor chemistry led to a failed experiment. They let Jalen Brunson walk for nothing, a disastrous mistake that cost them a perfect backcourt partner for Luka. Despite historic playoff performances, including leading Dallas to the Western Conference Finals in 2022, the front office never secured the elite supporting cast needed to sustain success. Instead of maximizing his prime, they forced Luka to carry an unstable, poorly constructed team. And now they've traded away their future, banking on an older cast of Klay Thompson, AD, and Kyrie to lead them from here on. It was a now move without the future in mind that sets a bad tone for the team moving forward. Stunt number 1, giving up a generational superstar for less than value. Trading a top 5 player in the NBA is already a franchise-altering mistake, but doing it without getting equal value in return is what makes this move a complete disaster for the Mavericks. Luka Dončić isn't just a superstar, he's a once-in-a-generational talent. At just 25 years old, he's already putting up historic numbers, drawing comparisons to Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, and even LeBron James. Players like Luka don't become available ever. Teams spend decades searching for a player like him, even with his poor defense, and when they find one, they do everything possible to keep him. Yet Dallas traded him away and got back a disappointing return. Instead of demanding a haul of picks, multiple young stars, and a game-changing assets, they settled for a package that doesn't come close to replacing Luka's value. No matter who they got in return, there's no scenario where this trade makes Dallas better. Teams like the Celtics and Larry Bird, Bulls Michael Jordan, and Spurs Tim Duncan built dynasties because they kept their generational stars and built around them. Even when things got rough, they found ways to make it work. The Mavericks, they panicked, gave up too soon, and set themselves back for years. But this isn't the first time Dallas has failed to keep a superstar. They let Steve Nash walk in 2004, only to watch him win back-to-back MVPs in Phoenix. They refused to build around Dirk Nowitzki after 2011, squandering his prime years. Now they've repeated history by giving up Luka before even hitting his peak. Instead of being a perennial contender, Dallas is now stuck in rebuild mode, hoping to find another player who can do what Luka already did. Spoiler, they won't anytime soon. Stunt number 2, the Mavericks repeated their worst mistakes. If there's one thing the Mavericks have mastered, it's not learning from their own history. This franchise has a habit of getting generational talent and then ruining everything. The Luka trade is just the latest and most damaging example of this pattern. We've seen this before. The Mavericks drafted Dirk Nowitzki in 1998, a player they lucked into and built around just well enough to eventually win a championship. But even with Dirk, they wasted years with bad roster decisions and never fully maximized his prime. In 2004, as mentioned, they let Steve Nash walk in free agency, thinking he wasn't worth the money. Nash immediately became an MVP in Phoenix and proved them wrong. In 2011, after Dirk led them to an NBA championship, they broke up the roster instead of running it back. They let Tyson Chandler, JJ Barea, and Caron Butler walk, dismantling a title-winning team for cap space that never turned into anything. In 2022, they had Luka's perfect co-star in Jalen Brunson, but instead of locking him up, they let him walk for nothing, watching him become an all-star in New York. And now they've done it again. They traded their best player, arguably top 5 in the NBA, not even in his prime yet, in a move that immediately makes them older and at least years away from competing for a championship. History has shown us that losing a generational player sets a franchise back for a decade or more. The Mavericks already made that mistake with Nash and Dirk Nowitzki, but trading Luka, this might be the one that buries them for good. Stunt number 3, the Mavericks had no clear path forward. Losing a superstar is bad enough, but what makes this trade an even bigger failure is that the Mavericks now have no direction, no identity, and no clear plan for the future. When a team trades away a generational player like Luka Dončić, the only way to justify it is by getting a foundation for the next era, either a young superstar to build around or a massive haul of draft picks to start fresh. But what did Dallas actually get in return? A package that does nothing to secure their future. They don't have a new face of the franchise, they aren't in a better position to compete now. They didn't get enough draft picks to rebuild properly, so what's next? A full-scale rebuild? A desperate attempt to stay competitive? The Mavericks are stuck in the worst possible situation. Too bad to compete, but not bad enough to start fresh. Look at how other teams handled losing their franchise players. The Pelicans got Zion Williamson and a stockpile of picks after trading Anthony Davis. The Thunder turned Paul George and Russell Westbrook into Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and a decade's worth of draft capital. The Celtics rebuilt from the Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce trade by landing Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. The Mavericks got nothing close to that. This is exactly what happened when Dirk retired. The team spent years stuck in mediocrity, never fully rebuilding but never contending. They wasted years chasing free agents that never landed instead of building organically. Now they're right back in the same cycle, except this time they lost Luka Dončić, their only real chance at avoiding another decade of irrelevance. All in all, the trade of Luka Dončić will go down as one of the worst moves in NBA history. The Mavericks gave up a generational superstar for a return that doesn't justify the loss, repeated the same mistakes that have haunted them for decades, and left themselves with no clear future. Instead of being a championship contender like they were last year and for years to come, they are now directionless, stuck between mediocrity and a rebuild. This wasn't just a bad trade, it was a death sentence for the Mavericks' relevance. And when the dust settles, this franchise may never recover from losing Luka Dončić. It's your boy JC Stunted Growth, and I'm out.